Grace and peace of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. The love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with each of us this morning. Mr. Speaker, today is International Women's Day. Time set aside across the globe to not only celebrate the social, cultural, economic, and political achievements of women, but also time for the global community to raise awareness about women's equality and to lobby for gender parity across the various subdivisions of society, and also to assist where we can and must in providing for female-focused charities. The 2021 theme this year, sir, is Choose the Challenge. Challenge, calling the world to challenge and become alert, not only individually but globally, that we are today, and all of us, responsible for our own thoughts and actions, not only today but every day. And we can all choose to challenge and call out gender bias, inequality. We can choose to seek out and celebrate women's achievements. Collectively, we can help to create a more inclusive world. Because, sir, from challenge comes change. So let us all choose to challenge. The speaker today, I give honor to all females. I honor with blessed memory my own grandmother, Mrs. Lita Lloyd, of late. My own mother, Eltoy Taylor, late, to whom all that I am and have abides in their great counsels. I extend great love and appreciation and respect to my wife, Michelle, to my daughters, Aisha, Kendra, Shiva, and Shakti, and Sanjay, and to my granddaughters, the youngest of which is only 3 months old. I pay respects and honor to the members, female members of this chamber, my female relatives and friends, members of our Ministry of Education, especially members of my office, Mrs. Pierce, Miss Gator, Miss Sawyer. I pay a special memory and respect and congratulations and thanks, Mr. Speaker, to our female teachers and administrators and staff members, not only of the Ministry of Education, yes, in particular, the Ministry of Education, the Department of Education, but to the public service as a whole. I honor females everywhere. And I give thanks. It is upon the great generosity and graces of the people of South Beach, to whom I pay honor this morning, sir, for the privilege to serve in this august chamber. You know, I never left. I made a promise in 2016-17 when I entered into frontline politics that I would be perpetually available. And I have been. According to the time that I have when I'm on this island, I'm in the community, I'm in my office, headquarters, an office that has been opened every single day of the week, weekdays. Been there every Thursday from 3 o'clock until the last person leaves, providing support, encouragement, inspiration, and help where necessary, and again, according to the availability of resources. Every Saturday, from the day I was elected, sir, I was in that community, walking about. It's a large community, very large. Some 4,000 residential spaces, homes, apartments, and so on. It's a lot. 5,000 plus registered voters. Meeting, sharing, communicating, helping where I'm able. I've invited all to participate. Some have, some haven't. But that's fine. To God in all things be the glory. And as you know, South Beach, I have given my approval for candidacy again to represent your wonderful community, if it is your wish. So I wish to say thank you to South Beach for your continuing support. May I also, Mr. Speaker, please pay respects and extend condolences and sympathies on behalf of our team and the community of South Beach to family Ms. Sophia Liu, Oxford Avenue, who died last week. Mr. Barry Smith, Mr. Rico Mackey, both of South Beach Drive North, who have gone on to their eternal reward. Eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord, and let light perpetual shine upon them. Mr. Speaker, may I please beg your indulgence that before I provide for this honorable chamber and the Bahamian people a report, the stewardship of the ministry and the Department of Education with the resources that the Bahamian people have vested in them, I want to begin by showing my appreciation and gratitude. You know, the ministry and the department have operated under extreme pressure for the past 18 months. First, it was Dorian that stretched the creative verve of our ministry by having to accommodate some 2,000 displaced students from Grand Bahama and Abaco, in addition to dozens of teachers and staff members. And as soon as that was near settled, sir, some 5-6 months later, we were hit with the pandemic on March the 15th, COVID-19, resulting in major disruption to our educational operation. Despite this ministry, department, have been the object of unending, it seems, criticism, some even bordering on vitriol at times. While we operated with what everybody knew, and all educational systems around the world would have operated in circumstances beyond any reasonable calculation. But you know, sir, not only did we persevere, but by all sensible and intelligent estimation, we thrived. Against near insurmountable odds. The school doors may have closed, but instructions never ended. Budgets may have been cut, but the provision of essential educational services were never compromised. You, sir, my very existence is grounded in the disposition of gratitude and remembering where I came from. I can only be grateful because I have no other explanation but God, Mr. Speaker. You know, Martha and her sister Mary faced what they thought were insurmountable odds. They had waited for some time for their friend Jesus to come to their home of Bethany, just some days' way out of Jerusalem. When he eventually came, he said, Lord, I know that if you were here, my brother would not have died. Jesus said, but I know that he will rise in the resurrection. And Jesus said, I am the resurrection and the life. John chapter 11, beginning at verse 40. And he also said, didn't I tell you, Martha and Mary, when I was last here, that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So, you know, he told them to take away the stone. And when he did, he looked his eyes to heaven and he gave thanks. It's the same Jesus, the Son of God, who gave thanks in Matthew 14. Again, insurmountable odds the disciples thought that they had faced. When all these people had been with Jesus all day long, they obviously were hungry. They had no money. They had nothing to feed them. But there was a young man with some provisions. And again he says, bring him to me. Matthew 4. John chapter 6. And again, looking to heaven, he gave thanks. That's the spirit of my life, Mr. Speaker. Because the incredible success, the Ministry of Education and the Department of Education, and in these situations, I lay at the feet of its leaders, to whom I give every ounce of credit, gratitude, and appreciation. Mrs. Lorraine Umbrista. Mrs. Lorraine Umbrista, the permanent secretary, and her team. The woman works from sun up to sundown and even beyond. Incredible talent, energy, focus, discipline, and commitment. Dedication. The director, Marcellus Taylor, and his team. Again, unequaled commitment, focus, and dedication. What the Bahamian people see as fruits in education, I see behind the scenes, and I see it every day, of painstaking, mentally exhausting hours, arduous work to keep the system going and to thrive. To them, so I owe every bit of gratitude and appreciation. And I thank them, because they are the stars in the successful firmament of this ministry and this education. You know, Nelson Mandela once said, Ubuntu, which means I am because of you. God's favor rest upon you, Mrs. Umbrista. Mr. Taylor, please extend my gracious, heartfelt thanks to your team. And may I further beg your indulgence, sir, before I get into the report to this honorable chamber. I begin with a story that was shared by a senior executive of our ministry. And he said to me that one day a group of students were found riding their bicycles on the streets in the neighborhood. The teacher at the school were looking for them because they had not been online. They went to the home to search them out. When they got there, they found them out in the streets. Asked them why they were not online in class. They gave some flimsy excuse. Upon further investigation, they found that they had all devices. They had the internet capability at their home. In fact, the bicycles that they were riding were given to them by Urban Renewal during school hours. A member of the community policing team was called, spoke to the mother and told her that if again these children were not found to be in school, she would have to deal with them. Reverend Burrows just spoke about parents this morning. I highlight this story, sir, because it exemplifies a circumstance found too often in our Bahamian society, and principally in the urban centers of New Providence, Grand Bahama, and Abaco, where many parents seem not to appreciate or understand their critical and indispensable role in the education of their children. They seem to believe, sir, that it is somebody else's job. School, ministry, Department of Education, the government, society, any and everybody except them. We know that COVID has brought seismic changes in the education in this country, forcing educational institutions from pre-primary to tertiary levels to have to rethink how they teach by formulating new methods, carrying out the instructional process. This pandemic has also had a disruptive effect on the educational lives of our students, their parents, and their families, and many in the educational field across the globe fear that the crucial loss of learning as a result of this pandemic, especially the students who are most vulnerable, may even be irrecoverable. As we know, because of the pandemic, school closed on March the 15th in the year 2020, immediately transferring instructions online. Because of this pandemic and the late completion of the examinations, national examinations, schools last year opened on October the 5th, approximately 1 month after they are ordinarily scheduled to do so. They opened face-to-face on all islands except New Providence, Grand Bahama, Exuma, Eleuthera, and Abaco. Grand Bahama came back face-to-face shortly thereafter. And as I mentioned in my previous speeches, Mr. Speaker, this pandemic has exposed the challenges in securing equitable access for all Bahamian students, the 47,000 in our public schools, the 20,000 in our private schools. Many students didn't have a device or didn't have the internet or both. And this made, of course, really challenging, difficult times for them and their parents. A difficult and perplexing set of circumstances for them. Of course, the ministry, as our commitment requires, jumped right in. We partnered with our stakeholders, Alive, BTC, immediately inviting them to increase their bandwidth across the system and as well to all of our schools, which they did. Of course, we encouraged our parents, where they could, to purchase devices instead of textbooks, because the device is the most critical need at this time. In the meantime, through the graces and generosity of dozens of corporate citizens, many individuals and families and organizations came to the rescue of the ministry and the students, Mr. Speaker. Through a grand initiative by Leno Services, thousands of devices were donated to the ministry and the various schools for the benefit of deserving and needing students. I will speak about this a little bit later on. Many students are still challenged, which is why in schools across this country, teachers have gone into their own pocket, their own resources, and have provided options and amenities for students. Uniforms, devices, money, and so on. Lunch. I have found in some schools, gratefully, that there are as many as 90% of the students online every day getting their instructions. Sadly, in some other schools, participation is less than 50%. This is not only dangerous for the child, of course it is, but also for society. As many of you know, Pope Francis is today ending his first ever, or any pope's first ever visit to Iraq. When he arrived last week, he met with the Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani. He's 90 years of age. He is the spiritual leader of the world's Shia Muslims. And in their conversations, they both reaffirmed the sacredness of human life. It is this sacredness, the sanctity of human life, that forms the buttressing character of this free and democratic nation we call the Bahamas, which is founded, as the preamble states, on spiritual values. Likewise, sir, it's the guiding and underpinning principle of the ministry and this government. That's why you would hear from time to time the Prime Minister, the Member of Parliament, Kalani, when he makes his speeches, he interpurses his presentations with the term saving lives. It's a noble objective because it's God's life and it is sacred. And it is this sacredness that I speak to our parents today about their children and their own lives. Recognizing that this life is precious, their children's life is precious, and they have the most powerful impact, and to appreciate that they are their children's first teacher. They who have the greatest influence on the way their children view education and its importance in their lives. It comes from their parents. It comes from the home. It comes from the community. It comes from the neighborhood. It comes from the society. We don't understand, appreciate that education is critical. It's the great equalizer. This is nothing to trifle with. And we have to take it seriously. We cannot be investing in name brands, clothes and things and 2,000 iPhones and claim that you don't have money to buy a device or to pay for uniforms or to provide lunch. We see this in our schools on a daily basis. Ask the teachers. Misplaced priorities, primarily by parents. And I congratulate those parents, Mr. Speaker, who take seriously their children's education. My grandmother always used to say, I celebrated her this morning, Leader Lloyd, child, get your learning, because no one can take that from you. I'm proud of those parents who, despite COVID and the many inconveniences and the challenges, the struggles, they've got their jobs, they have to take care of the children and focus on their education and make sure they're online and doing what, especially the younger children. Making sure that they secure for themselves a prosperous future by ensuring a certain routine and maintaining their focus, encouraging them and equipping them with the confidence that they need. At the same time, sir, I lament and I have to call out those parents who don't seem to be taking this seriously. The ministry is doing its part. The government is doing its part. The society is doing its part. The corporate and NGO communities are doing their part. The home must do its part. Parents must do their part. There is just no other way. I said this when I first came to this house. Education is everyone's business. No one can fold their metaphorical arms across their chests and take a pass. Nobody. Because it impacts everyone. Education. Take a look at the society. And you will see the derelict nature of our circumstances and our lack of achievement as a result of someone thinking that it ain't my responsibility. Now, of course, I speak also to the students. Because this is your education. And you must take it seriously. As I just said, what you have up here, no one can take that from you. So get serious. Dr. Picard came to visit me last week. I want to say thanks to my colleague, Minister Enfield, North Abaco. Dr. William Picard is the Bahamas' newest honorary consul to the state of Michigan, the United States of America. And he visited several government officials, the Governor General, Prime Minister, and came to visit us, the Ministry of Education. He's an older man, but he is a very well-off man. He is like the Honourable Member for Southern Shores, very, very well-resourced. And he said to me, Mr. Speaker, he said that, I said, would you kindly speak into our camera and say something, what advice would you give to our students? And he said this, he says, anyone from anywhere can achieve anything, long as they put in the work. Anyone from anywhere can achieve anything as long as they put in the work. You remember the great book by Malcolm Gladwell, The Outliers? Talked about 10,000 hours minimum, which essentially equates somewhere around 10 years. He talked about the Beatles. Many people thought that the Beatles just burst on the scene in 1964. But he went back and showed that the Beatles were playing in Germany in clubs for years before that, with nobody in the audience. And they were hopeless. They were terrible. They were making and perfecting their craft over and over and over. When they burst on the scene, they had already 10 years of experience. Michael Jordan used to talk about shooting 1,000 balls. Remember that? 1,000 shots he took, Mr. Speaker. Michael Jordan. Of course, we see Michael Jordan as if having just burst on the scene at the University of North Carolina. Thousands of hours. Thousands of hours. So my dear beloved students, you want to be great? Put in the time. Dr. Picard said, Mr. Speaker, that he went to Michigan, University of Michigan, and Ohio State, where he got his master's and his PhD. Imagine this now. And he never went to a football game. Didn't have the time. Because he was in the library having to study. Because the teacher in high school told his parents, don't waste your time with this boy because he is not college material. And because of that, he knew that he had to extend himself more than the other ordinary student. PhD. Multi-billionaire several times over. Huh? So my point is, Mr. Speaker, and I speak again to parents, please take this education seriously. Students, take this seriously. I know that the pandemic is an excuse, and it's challenging and difficult. When I was a student, we had to go to the Eastern Public Library on Mackey Street. We used to walk from down at Palmdale Prime, which is now Palmdale Prime. We used to call it Eastern Junior. Come up there. We had to look through the books. Many of you would remember that our parents used to save so that we could get one Encyclopedia Britannica. You remember that? Encyclopedia Britannica. You don't need to do that anymore today. See it right here? The word is in your hands. You don't have to leave home. It's right here. Anything you want to know, you can know. You can learn at any time, anywhere, whatever you need to learn, right here. Not for the games, not to run gossip, not to be sending foolish WhatsApp voice notes and so on and so forth, but to educate and train yourself. Get serious about education. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Now, with your permission, may I please, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, last week.
Honourable Member, I must say, I endorse that message. If a man's education is finished, someone said, he is finished. So I endorse your message, Honourable Member for South Beach.
Thank you very much. Well, Mr. Speaker, a few people know that you had a father who didn't take no foolishness. You grew up in Argo like I grew up in Long Island, and you know we had parents who wasn't playing around. Last week, sir, the Bahamas hosted the meetings of the Technical Advisory Committee of the University of the West Indies. By the way, sir, could you give me back that time? I was just preparing. Every 2 years, we get together, and the Permanent Secretary and her team visits with the University of the West Indies to discuss the biannual budgets. So every 2 years, but this year, for the very first time, and I'm very proud to say that the Bahamas was the host of the meeting. We discussed the budget for the University of the West Indies. As you know, Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas has been a contributory to the university by way of an annual subvention of several $1 million a year. We do that to support the university as a regional tertiary institution, but we do it because we have hundreds of students who not only have gone through the university, including the member for Kelani, the member for Carmichael, the member for South Andros, but also because we now have many students in the various disciplines, particularly law, medicine, agriculture, and so on. Like everywhere else, COVID has impacted higher education across the globe. Some universities have reduced their staff, some have cut back on disciplines, some have cut back on hours, and despite our country's own budgetary constraints, sir, the government has decided that it cannot afford to reduce the government's funding to the University of the Bahamas or to the University of the West Indies, our flagship university in this region. That is simply not an option. Funding in the amount of 2.1 plus millions of dollars and 15 plus million dollars, $15.7 million have been paid to the UE and to the University of the Bahamas respectively for subventions in the first half of the 2021 fiscal year. In addition, we have paid out tertiary grants of some $7.3 million and capital funding of $139,152.55. We have never reneged on our subventions, and we have fully supported the students at the University of the West Indies and the University of the Bahamas. In fact, Sir Hilary Beckles, as you know, is the Vice Chancellor, continues to congratulate and thank the Bahamas for not only paying our subvention in full, but by paying it on time. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Education further recognizes that much of our success is undergirded by the strength of the partnerships that we have forged over the years. Partners like the University of the Bahamas and the Bahamas Technical Vocational Institute, BTVI, have played an integral role in the success of our initiatives. We rely on the University of the Bahamas to provide the majority of our teachers. And this year, because of COVID-19, the teaching practice sessions with our students and the internal moderation and assessment of these well-trained pre-service teachers had to be conducted virtually. Curriculum officers who conducted the internal moderation assessment commended these pre-service teachers for the excellent execution of their well-planned lessons, their beautiful electronic portfolios, their professionalism, and the ease at which and with which they handled the virtual environment. We are also pleased, with the partnership that we have with the Bahamas Technical Vocational Institute and what they have done, especially with students who are considered underprivileged or in otherwise vocationally or academically challenged. And I would like to speak to that just for a moment. At this moment, sir, subvention payments to BTVI up to the fiscal year 2021, the midterm amount is $3,051,556.50. We know that the draft National Development Plan of 2016 identified a national skills gap as one of the more serious challenges facing this country. In 2019, BTVI, along with the Ministry of Labor and the Organization for Responsible Government, conducted a skills gap survey. And it revealed that some 60% of Bahamian employers have concerns about the skill sets and the quality of prospective employees. And when I say skill sets, I mean both hard and soft skills. It's amazing that we have to teach soft skills today. Most of us in this chamber learned that on our grandmother's knee. Good morning, good afternoon, thank you, please, yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. Today, too often we hear, huh? What you say? You talking to me? Young little children, say it again. Little children talking to adults. And what? Yes. In response, because of that skills gap, BTVI immediately revised its curriculum to create short, stackable, flexible, certified courses, virtual opportunities countrywide, dual enrollments for high school students, an emphasis on the application of skills, and to ensure that students, once completing those courses, will have the ability to be certified through Cisco, NCCER, City and Guilds, Microsoft, and many others. Additionally, BTVI developed and delivered ICT college-level courses with industry certification to 400 of our grades 10 to 12 high school students who have completed or are about to complete 12 BTVI courses, and they will do so such that this coming Tuesday they will now receive some acknowledgement and recognition. Many of these students are reporting early acceptance at Tier 1 universities in the United States and Canada. And in part, these certifications have been received and accepted into those university programs. Additionally, BTVI has partnered with RBC to generate funds for the retention of students. They have adopted software systems to improve math and reading scores. They have secured partnership with the Commonwealth of Learning, COL, to train 30 faculty members on developing and delivering online classes. They have hosted a U.S. Fulbright Scholar with teaching and online expertise. And as mentioned, the National Center for Construction Education and Research, NCCER, provides an initiation course offering, 80 hours of which is general and that's virtual, which would lead eventually, hopefully, to 240 hours of master craftsman in one of the many construction-like disciplines, carpentry, electrical, plumbing, and so on. Credits, as I said, Mr. Speaker, are certified, accepted by universities across the globe, including the United States. For instance, we have partnered with Valencia College, one of the largest community and vocational schools in the United States. Its school is in Orlando. They are our supporting partner. And they have helped us train over 100 trainers in the Bahamas. Plan is, Mr. Speaker, that by December of this year, some 200 Bahamian students will become fully certified as master craftspersons, going a very long way to closing the skills gap in this country. We are also proud to tell you that 90 students have completed the initial core NCCER certifications. Those students are in Grand Bahama, Abaco, and, believe it or not, Moores Island. Those students, Mr. Speaker, will be graduating, those 90, this coming Tuesday. Another 200 is now presently in the program, and the plans is to have 600 by August and 1,000 additional by 2021. I am also delighted to inform this Honourable House that City and Guilds, how many of you remember that? City and Guilds. City and Guilds has just approved a 6-month certificate program in what is called Global Hospitality. And it will feature 4 courses: Introduction to Hospitality, Introduction to Hospitality Management, Introduction to Tourism Marketing, and a certificate in the Introduction to Strategic Tourism Marketing. BTVI is also working on dual enrollment for students in private high schools. And I keep saying dual enrollment, Mr. Speaker. May I just pause for a moment, so if you would just hold the time. Mr. Speaker, I just want to pause to say that dual enrollment means simply this: students in grades 10, 11, and 12 are able to take BTVI certified courses. And when they graduate from high school with a high school diploma, at the same time, sir, they will be graduating from BTVI with a diploma and with certification. That is presently going on right now, Mr. Speaker, in some of our high schools. Some 400 of our students are doing this, and now it's being extended to private schools. 3 years ago, some 30% of the BTVI graduates, only 30%, were achieving certification in their various disciplines. Today, it is over 80% of BTVI students who are achieving certifications in their various disciplines. And hopefully, by summer, certainly by the beginning of school next year, BTVI is looking to introduce dual enrollment program in the Family Islands for grades 11 and 12. And again, these would be 5 course certificate courses in workforce preparation in collaboration with the Commonwealth of Learning. And these courses would end up in certifications with City and Guilds and at least 2 Cisco. Another very important part of BTVI, and I'm emphasizing BTVI today, sir, is because this institution has shown phenomenal growth in the past 2 years, especially because the government has provided free tuition for all full-time Bahamian students. Free tuition for all full-time Bahamian students. And once completing their programs, they receive industry, not BTVI, not the Bahamas government, industry certification ready for real-time job applications. So it's a remarkable work that Mr. Kevin Baston, the board chair, and Dr. Robert Robertson and his team of Andy Gape and Mr. David are doing at BTVI. And they really need to be commended because, as you know, BTVI is in desperate need of a brand new campus. And they are holding that place together with scotch tape, with band-aids, and so on, and doing a fantastic job in the process. Just to tell you even more, they are planning an accelerated skills program in which a student enters into a 12-week program and where they are introduced in an intensive way to about 5 construction trade courses: carpentry, plumbing, electrical installation, and a couple of others. And it is our intention, sir, that by the end of summer, some 1,500 Bahamian students, males and females, will have completed that accelerated program this year. You will remember I mentioned in the House of Assembly that we had secured a $5 million loan from the Caribbean Development Bank. It's called an enhancement project. It's institutional strengthening, helping to prepare labs for industry standards and so on. That is progressing extremely well. We, of course, as a result of COVID, we have had to, and we intend to restructure the program and to take things out that are not necessary at this time and to add things in that are necessary, and that is going very well. They have, as a part of that, they have hired 2 Bahamian project managers who are helping to steer that program. So I'm very proud of BTVI. Their enrollment has jumped from over 4,500 to now well over 6,000 as a result of the government's initiative in providing free tuition to BTVI. The University of the Bahamas is also, Mr. Speaker, one of those institutions where the government has made a commitment. And this is a commitment in the government's plan as a free national movement to provide access to quality tertiary education. Now today, free tuition for all qualified Bahamian full-time students at the University of the Bahamas. Free tuition. First time in the history of this country. Students going to the university or the college or whatever you want to call it, now today can go there without not having to pay $1 for their tuition. Not only that, Mr. Speaker, housing allowance is provided for all Family Island residents to the tune of $500 every single month payable to the landlord. This government. You hear people talk about not caring. If this is an example of care, I don't know what is. But I accept and understand that the dictionary they studied wasn't the Oxford or the Webster, but it was one that they had concocted from the... At the University of Bahamas, I'm proud of Dr. Rodney Smith and his team. On a dime, they went from 100% face-to-face to over 90% virtual. On a dime. In the process, they established a COVID-19 task force co-chaired by Dr. Marcellus Elliott Ferguson, Vice President, Administrative Services, and Mr. Ronnie Stevenson, Vice President, Operations, to ensure that every aspect of UB's operations during this pandemic adheres to the emergency orders and allows for safe operations on campus for those who must be on campus. When I say over 90%, there are some disciplines where obviously you cannot do it virtually, sir. You know, hospitality, for instance, is one of them when you're talking about cooking. Kind of difficult to do that virtually. And you can learn and study the theory all you want, but you have to be able to put the egg in the pot and boil it. For the fall of 2020, there had been a decrease in enrollment. Unique enrolled students, however, increased by 4% to 5,254. UB did not retain this number because there were 2 major deregistration cycles. The university's yield rate for new admitted students rose to 62% from 61% last year. and pre-deregistration, this figure stood at 72%. There were 2,252 new student applicants, of which 1,598 were admitted. The government grant last semester was for students with 3,520 students, and for this semester, meaning 2021, 3,590 students. The university's communications team responded by setting up a web page called COVID-19 Response and Updates, where constituents can find information about the university's response to the pandemic, policies, government updates, and other resources. During this pandemic, both academic freedom and shared governance have been essential to UB's ability to pivot and remain a functioning tertiary level institution. Essential to all of UB's successes is the faculty and staff who took on so many other duties and responsibilities. They have been using the innovative use of technology, working enthusiastically with students and making sure that the high quality of education for which UB is renowned is delivered in a timely and an accurate fashion. Today, in its full second semester, UB is still using the virtual online modalities because 10% of its classes are taught face-to-face with strict COVID-19 protocols in place. Those classes include culinary arts and tourism studies, physical education classes, and nursing practicums. The university's Senate, Academic Senate, led by Dr. Faith Butler, has reviewed and approved several new or expanded degree programs, including a Master's of Business with concentration in accounting, leadership, financial decision-making, entrepreneurship and innovation, hospitality management, and events management. There's also a graduate certificate and graduate diploma in public administration, and a BA in liberal arts at the UB North Campus. And the Senate has just approved a pre-pharmacy program. I believe, Mr. Speaker, you will be hearing about UB's first doctorate degree program very soon. I want to speak about research at UB because as a university, that's the linchpin of your status. University, you have to create knowledge. Comprehensive case study, the response of University of the Bahamas to the COVID-19 pandemic, has also been drafted to scientifically look at all of the changes that have happened over the last year. While the study examines all aspects of the university operation, of particular interest is the aspect of online teaching on student success. I personally look very much forward to seeing the final case study of this research. In addition, UB has been diligently applying for and has been awarded research grants. There are currently approximately 12 ongoing grants totaling some $1,236,537.28 in revenue for the university. During this pandemic, again, sir, the university was one of 6 tertiary institutions globally to have won the Ellucian 2020 Impact Award this past September. Ellucian Banner is the world's most advanced data management system and is used by colleges and universities in over 50 countries around the globe. Just this past week, the university released a communication regarding the gradual return to campus, adhering to strict COVID-19 protocols. Over the next several weeks, more offices will be manned using shifts, thus allowing for a limited degree of face-to-face services. Already, the business office, the administrative services, records, admissions, etc., and several computer labs are open for student use. The university will continue the rest of this spring semester in an emergency remote teaching mode. However, there will be increased use of campus activities. As I indicated earlier, so tuition is free at the University of the Bahamas and BTVI for qualified Bahamian students. However, one of the COVID-19's unfortunate effects was that the Ministry of Education was forced to make the tough decision to place a moratorium on all new international scholarships for the 2020-2021 scholarship cycle. That moratorium has now been lifted, I am proud to say, Mr. Speaker, for the 21-22 school year. And I am pleased to report that approval was granted by Cabinet to award funding for new awards to local tertiary institutions. And as a result, some 65 students qualified for tuition assistance to attend those local institutions, certified. Let me be clear, Mr. Speaker, with regard to existing students, scholarship commitments is fixed and is determined based on the contracts of those students, and they will be honored. They have no fear. Now, Mr. Speaker, as you know, sir, the Ministry of Education has 5 key priority areas that I highlight here for us today. Members of the media, just for your benefit. Those are the areas. Universal pre-primary education. 3rd grade literacy, that's the GLAP. Bahamas High School diploma. School modernization. And the digital evolution. I want to begin, sir, with the preschool program. Major success in this country. I draw your attention, Mr. Speaker and honorable members, to a 2014 publication of the Inter-American Development Bank. And here's what it says, and I quote, "Development in early childhood casts a long shadow. Long-term panels show that the benefits of early investments can be seen all the way into adulthood. In one study from Jamaica, children who benefited from a parenting intervention in the first 2 years of their life earned wages in adulthood that were 25% higher than comparable children who had not participated. Children who had received the parenting intervention were also less likely to be engaged in criminal activities in early adulthood. Credible evidence from a number of sources reveals that children with deficits in nutrition, cognition, language, motor, and socio-emotional development early on are less likely to learn in school, are more likely to engage in risky behaviors that result in early pregnancy, school dropout, and violence in adolescence, and are less likely to become productive adults." End quote. As was mentioned many times, one of the major initiatives of this ministry and this government has been to achieve universal pre-primary education by the year 2025. Pre-primary. According to the last census, there were some 12,000 children in the Bahamas between the ages of 3 and 4. And I purposely use the word children, Mr. Speaker, because I hear the term kids quite often. I know it's an American term. But kids, goats have kids. And I cringe emotionally when I hear adults refer to children as kids. I'm really disturbed by that. I try to correct it respectfully, charitably, when I can. Goats have kids. Sheep have lamb. Elephants have whatever you call them, baby elephants. Dogs have puppies. You know, cats have kittens. Humans have children, not kids. Well, if you struggle like my family did from Long Island, you say children. But you get the point. So I certainly, in our educational sphere, please, don't refer to them as any kids. They're not kids. They're children. Parents, you don't have 4 kids. You have 4 children. Anyhow, Mr. Speaker, what I respectfully, sir, and I ask this most respectfully, each time I do that little diversion, if I could get the minute back, so I'd appreciate. Like the IDB report stated, so development in early childhood casts a long shadow. It impacts the child's readiness for regular school, their likelihood of graduation, and their long-term success. I'm proud of Mrs. Archer and her team at the Preschool Council. They do a phenomenal job. Mrs. Leisha Burrows, who works in the ministry as an assistant director. Phenomenal work. Because we, the Preschool and the Daycare Council, since its inception of COVID-19, partnered on a daily basis with all concerned government agencies and civic organizations with the gift of virtual platforms. All owners and operators of daycare and preschool centers throughout the Bahamas pertaining to the care and education of their children. As a result, the following activities were achieved and in some cases are being continued. Number one, regular meetings with the daycare and preschool operators to explain to them what the emergency orders mean. Number two, training sessions for those operators with the Department of Environmental Health pertaining to protocol rules. Number three, collaboration with our ministry through the permanent secretary and the team at NACOV pertaining to the reopening of preschools, primary schools, and high schools. We assisted. Number four, private preschools with the registration procedures to enable face-to-face learning. Number five, partnered with private sector and the Ministry of Education's early childhood section to enable underprivileged, this is very important, to enable underprivileged children to be able to attend a quality of government-approved preschool. So where cases where we did not have spaces in the government preschools, we enabled through this government the voucher system, paying a $2,000 per voucher for parents to send their child to an approved, government-approved preschool in their neighborhood. And we have done that to the tune, Mr. Speaker, now of almost 4,000 students. In addition, Mrs. Archer and her team produced policy documents along with the guidance of the ministry for the reopening of preschools in collaboration with the Ministry of Health, the Department of Environment Health, and the Public Health Department. Number eight, we presently are partnering with the Prime Minister's Delivery Unit and the Ministry of Education's Preschool Early Childhood Section in the initiative for access to Crown land for daycare and preschool owners. Despite the challenges brought on by this pandemic, we are forging ahead with ensuring that there is equity in the learning environment in our society. In order to facilitate this among our children, back in November of 2020, this government, through the Access Accelerator Small Business Development Center, presented monetary grants to qualified preschool owners. The goal of the grants was to increase the number of privately owned preschools and by extension increase the amount of seats available for preschoolers to enable the government to meet its targets of universal preschool education. Operators use the funds to open new preschool, to expand an existing one or improve the standards of an existing one, particularly in neighborhoods which are fast growing. Mr. Speaker, $1 million was earmarked for this preschool grant project, and back in November, the government distributed almost $800,000 to some 36 preschools. The maximum grant funding was $25,000, and the grants range from $12,500 to $25,000. Through again the efforts of the Preschool Council under the leadership of Mrs. Archer and her team, and again, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry's Universal Pre-Primary Education Voucher Program, launched in 2018, has resulted in significant and consistent increase in the amount of 3- and 4-year-olds enrolled in the pre-primary program in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Very, very proud. Today, there are now 1,500 additional vouchers. And of that amount, we have already distributed between July of last year and December of last year, some 929 vouchers to 59 privately owned preschools. Cost of that those vouchers, Mr. Speaker. The vouchers. How much we? Almost $1 million. Almost $1 million gone into small businesses, private preschools, for the benefit of our people. Also last year, oh yes, the balance of the vouchers, 571, will be distributed to registered private-owned preschools who make application and have been vetted and have met qualifications outlined by relevant regulatory bodies. Also in July, the ministry released new guidelines for preschool operation, inclusive of measures provided by the public health authorities and the Environmental Health Sanitation Department. Private preschools and daycare centers registered under the Act were permitted to start with the registration of students during this time. I speak now about technology. As you know, Mr. Speaker, digitization is a very dominant feature of our educational system. In my first presentation in this Honourable House, made the commitment that the government's intention was to digitize completely and fully, comprehensively, the educational system of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And while this invisible enemy called COVID-19 has halted activity globally, it has failed to stop our efforts to continue educating our young people. The ministry, from the onset of this pandemic, has sought innovative avenues to create multiple streams of learning and instructional environment. Leading this charge is the Technology Division, with a mandate to implement and upgrade technologies in all of our schools. Technology, sir, is not an option. It is not a mere enhancement in instruction. It is a necessity, indispensable. We cannot do without it. This technological revolution and evolution ensures equitable, inclusive, and quality education for all, while promoting lifelong learning opportunities to students to reach their maximum potential. Despite the forceful impact of Hurricane Dorian and the pandemic, thus resulting in fiscal restructure, the Ministry of Education was still able to make significant achievements. During the past year, the Department of Education's virtual school has expanded to accommodate more teachers. And to this end, work was completed to accommodate a March 1st, 2020 occupancy on new premises for the virtual school. Also in 2020, a company called One-on-One out of Jamaica, an affiliate of BTC, was engaged to provide interim learning management system, LMS, for students and teachers who are engaged in the virtual learning environment. Later in 2020, Cable Bahamas channels 295 and 296 were launched to aid in the teaching and learning process, which meant that students who were not privy to internet access or connectivity were able to receive their lessons daily. Additionally, the channels also provided content for students who were preparing for national exams. Mr. Speaker, as the pandemic grew on, it became patently clear that students without devices or internet were going to suffer possible, irreparable educational harm. Consequently, in mid-2020, the ministry purchased 10,880 devices at a cost of over $1.3 million, primarily for students on the lunch program, those with disabilities, or those from low-income families. Now you can clap. Up to that point, the Department of Education had already been distributing tablets for primary school students, while it continued this during the pandemic. In September, we were able to continue with the procurement exercise for those primary school students with a view to provide a tablet for every primary school student and a laptop for every teacher in the primary system during this academic year at a cost of $2.8 million. Happy to report to you today, sir, that all primary districts in New Providence have received their devices and distribution continues in the Family Islands. The end of 2020-2021 school year, the ministry pledged that no child will be left, at the start of the 2020-21 school year. Let me put my glasses back on. The ministry pledged that no child will be left behind and committed with the help of its stakeholders and partners to ensure that every public school student who needed a device will get one. That was our commitment. That was our pledge. Consequently, so in September of 2020, the ministry forged a partnership with Leno and Corporate Bahamas, Leno Services and Corporate Bahamas, to assist the Ministry of Education providing tablets and internet connectivity for our students. I'm happy to report to you today, sir, that the response to this initiative has been overwhelming. The corporate community has proven to be genuine partners in the advancement of education in this country. The drive has raised over $500,000 in donations, including devices and internet connectivity. With their assistance, the ministry has now been able to put a device in the hands of over 90% of our public school students. 90%, over 90%. To date, of the 47,000 students in the public school, only 3,800 students still are without a device, and we are meeting that objective as we speak. These devices were given to students as a one-time offer to assist them with their learning. The ministry's goal is to digitize the entire public educational system, linking all districts, public schools, and all satellite offices with the ministry. We do this by creating a wide area network. And as I said, the 21st century demands of education, instruction, learning, and management, the educational requirements, of education, instruction, learning, and management demands it. It's simply not an option. I'm also happy to report that we have completed all schools and satellite offices on the island of New Providence, Eleuthera, and Grand Bahama. The remaining islands will be upgraded shortly, pending requisite approvals and the availability of funding. To date, we have spent $12 million, and another $10.3 million is needed to complete the remaining islands. So I also announced during October of last year, bandwidth at all schools was doubled to accommodate all students and teachers. Additionally, the bandwidth to the network was increased from 3G to 10G to accommodate all users. And in 2020, we engaged Cloud Carib in an Active Directory at a cost of $93,977.36. This directory will help organize the use of computers on the network, and it will be used to organize the ministry's hierarchy. Additionally, a technology task force was commissioned with the responsibility of the implementation of a comprehensive EMIS, Educational Management Information System, and an LMS, Learning Management System. Hurricane Dorian and now COVID-19 has shown us that an EMIS and an LMS are critical. Unfortunately, the execution of this initiative has been placed on hold due to financial constraints. In the interim, the company One-on-One is continuing to provide interim solution at a cost of $450,667.84. I turn now, Mr. Speaker, to schools management. Mr. Speaker, in the 2021 fiscal year, schools management saw a reduction in the number of teachers available for the start of the school year. Hurricane Dorian displaced students and teachers from Abaco and Grand Bahama were initially posted temporarily in other schools. They were returned to Abaco and Grand Bahama as the opportunity arose. Prior to the pandemic, the ministry anticipated recruiting about 16 Cuban specialist teachers. But because of the circumstances and financial constraints, this could not be accommodated. Consequently, this left a void in these subject areas. However, I'm happy to report Last week, Friday, I had a conversation with the Cuban ambassador, and he advised me that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Cuba and the Ministry of Education come to an agreement to extend for an additional 2 years the 45 Cuban teachers that we have here in the Bahamas, going a very long way of helping us with those specialist areas, because those Cuban teachers, particularly, Mr. Speaker, meet some very critical needs, especially in special education and agriculture, especially. I turn now, sir, to the national exams, which much has been said and written about. As we know, the pandemic caused a delay and a postponement in some of our 2020 examinations. The BJC, the BGCSE, just by its completion, was for us a major accomplishment. Despite the challenges, the assessment and the testing and evaluation assessment division, under the incredible leadership of Ms. Evelyn Soy, able to complete the marking, grading, and release of funds, release of results by the first week of December 2020. Grades were awarded showed a decrease when compared to 2019. But it is pleasing to note that 140 candidates received 5 or more A's. Of the 140, 38 received 8 A or more A's. Yes, Mr. Speaker, there was a decrease in candidature, with many students opting not to sit all of their subjects because some chose not to write the examinations and others had already entered tertiary institutions here and abroad. While some in the media and others sought to make an issue of this, I may wish to remind you that it is not unusual. Each year, hundreds of students, some 15 or so % of those that were previously registered to sit the exams, never show up. And that is not unique to the Bahamas. It is the situation elsewhere as well. I just hosted last week the Human Development Council of CARICOM. And the subject was the CXC exam. Same thing. Students, for any number of reasons, though they have registered because they are already in college, or they have gotten a job, or something else, they just simply don't show up. 10, 15, 20% of them just never bothered to show up. Some defer sitting the exams to another year, or again, any number of reasons. They don't feel prepared. So it's not anything unusual about it. The number of grades decreased when compared to 2019. There were 15,119 grades. This was about a 36% decrease over 2019. Of the total number of candidates who wrote the exam, as I indicated earlier, a respectable number had achieved great markings. It should be noted that the events of 2020 will affect performances of candidates in 21 and 22 examinations, and even beyond, because of circumstances beyond their control. However, the Ministry of Education is doing all it can to mitigate any negative fallout from the COVID-19 virus. As previously announced, the exams are scheduled to start on April the 13th. But with most students just returning to face-to-face on February the 23rd, it is possible that the schedule may be adjusted to give our students more time if we find it necessary to prepare. I want to repeat that. As announced, the exams are scheduled to start on April the 13th. But with most students just returning to face-to-face on February the 23rd, it is possible that the schedule may be adjusted to give our students more time if we find it necessary to prepare. Therefore, the ministry asks parents and students to remain keenly alert for future announcements about the start and schedule of exams. In the meantime, students, please take this time to prepare as earnestly as you can, because the exams are coming, barring any unforeseen circumstances. Mr. Speaker, the officers of the Curriculum Division ensured that curriculum implementation and instruction for students were not interrupted despite the pandemic. While it did not necessitate change to the curriculum's content, it did require us to be innovative in the way the national curriculum was implemented. Officers, working along with district superintendent and teachers, developed national pacing guides for all grade levels in all grade disciplines. These guides outline both the topics to be taught and the term in a given term and the length of time that ought to be dedicated to each concept or content matter. The goal was to ensure greater standardization across the archipelago, no matter the instructional model that schools were using. This year, the ministry fully launched its learning management system, and just as they had done in the months prior to the virtual platform, curriculum officers guided teachers through the preparation and uploading of digital instructional kits designed to enhance instruction from pre-primary to 12th grade. I am therefore pleased to say today, Mr. Speaker, that more than 2,000 digital kits with lesson plans, videos, PowerPoint presentations, and activity sheets have been uploaded to the LMS and are being successfully utilized by teachers across the Bahamas. To date, more than 40,000 live lessons have been held virtually, reaching an approximately 60% of our students registered in the public schools. Unfortunately, not all of our students were able to access instructions virtually, either due to lack of devices, connectivity, electrical power, or other reasons. Therefore, the Curriculum Division mobilized its officers to produce hard copy instruction kits across all grade levels and disciplines. And as such, again, more than 3,000 kits were distributed to our schools throughout the Bahamas during term 1, and in term 2, curriculum officers prepared and uploaded additional kits so that school administrators would access and download information for students as was needed. As you would have seen, Mr. Speaker, there is concern about the grade level assessment test. When we came recently, the GLAT, the GLAT, was performing at approximately 58%. And target was that we would achieve 63% efficiency or proficiency in the GLAT. Happy to tell you that we have exceeded that objective. And we did so because of the dedication of our teachers and their commitment. We took it upon ourselves, and I can name one school in particular, Stephen Dillon, where the teachers and the principal got together and said that we are not going to continue to have less than optimal results in our reading. They began by bringing those students in before the 9 o'clock start hour, sir. I believe, before COVID, of course, if you were to go to Stephen Dillon, you would find that almost every single student was on the campus at 8 o'clock in the morning, going through their reading drills. Unheard of in a public school, especially in a school in that particular area. We realize that innovation is necessary to successfully implement the curriculum. And as a result, our officers, especially our curriculum officers, have been undergoing continuous professional development. In August of last year, 2020, the Curriculum Division spearheaded the first annual Virtual Teacher Conference, offering 175 best practices sessions to educators across the country. Over the course of several months, 40 webinars have been offered by facilitators of the virtual school. Webinars which have been uploaded to the Ministry's Education website for easy and continued access. Ongoing curriculum reform saw officers in the Curriculum Division still working at various stages on the curriculum development cycle. We are pleased to report that by July of this year, 2021, we anticipate a newly revised curriculum in more than 10 disciplines in the public education system in the Bahamas, including language arts, social studies, science and computer studies at the primary level. At the secondary level, business studies, general science, biology, chemistry, computer studies, carpentry, construction, and the performing arts. Because we realize that the curriculum has to be relevant 21st century in which we live. We all can appreciate that transition from the traditional face-to-face instruction to a virtual instruction model has not been easy for some of our officers, teachers, students, and our parents. We realize that is why our special services section has been providing psychosocial support through telephone counseling sessions, via social media platforms, to help to make the transition a little easier. Additionally, town hall meeting was held emphasizing topics such as coping skills during COVID-19, or internet safety, cyberbullying, and spiritual wellness. Come to the subject now in my remaining minutes, human resources. The Member of Parliament for Garden Hills talked about this a little bit earlier, Mr. Speaker, and he made his presentation. In order for us to function properly, efficiently, and effectively, we obviously need people. Quality people, professional people. The Department of Education was given approval to appoint 249 persons to serve as teachers, craft instructors, and other staff based, cost of $5.4 million. Thus far, only 119 have been appointed at a cost of $2.89 million. This is because of financial constraints. These appointments include trained teachers, technical teachers, assistant teachers, guidance counselors, school psychologists, craft instructors. They have appointed, put in schools across the world. As is mentioned in our last year's midterm report, approval was granted for the extension of appointment on temporary month-to-month basis of 636 general service workers, teachers' aides, security officers, custodial and janitorial workers, and pending funding those persons who perform their duties well, maintain acceptable punctuality and attendance levels, and have positive security vetting, would be recommended to permanent and pensionable establishments. You didn't hear that, so let me say it again. At last year's midterm report, approval was granted for the extension of appointment on temporary month-to-month terms of some 637 workers in the Ministry of Education, if they show themselves to be approved. And I've outlined the conditions. Keep your nose clean, be to work on time, do as you're supposed to do, show respect and manners, and so on. They will be recommended to the permanent and pensionable establishment. This regularization exercise is presently underway. And the ministry's hard-working human resource team, led by Ms. Sarita Clark and Ms. Dawn Culmer, with the support of the registry staff, are working in collaboration with the Ministry of Public Service to have these recommendations processed as quickly as possible. Yes, Mr. Gardner. Amid the challenges of the COVID-19, work on Human Resource Unit continued with these submissions to the Ministry of Public Service, including matters such as re-employments, confirmations, promotions, and other related exercises. Efforts will be made to further the regularization exercise to include persons appointed on temporary weekly terms, as well as persons, you asked me about this, member. You asked me about this, so I want you to hear this. Efforts will be made to further the regularization exercise to include persons on temporary weekly terms, as well as those persons employed in the library system and the school boards. For a total of some 1,248 persons. Another notable exercise being undertaken is the confirmation of school administrators. Such persons were recently appointed to act in administrative level positions such as senior mistresses and masters, principals, and assistant directors of education. Additionally, The review of the career paths of guidance counselors and security officers is complete. Consequently, the necessary approval and funding to recommend the advancement of such persons is being sought. Mr. Speaker, in the interest of time, let me just briefly say that the Department of Archives was severely impacted during COVID-19, as you would expect. And as a result, in preparing for staff to return, we expended some $15,000, almost $16,000, putting in plexiglass and hand sanitizing stations throughout all areas of the building. Of course, it's very important for us to make sure that in every department, including the Department of Archives, we have a surplus of cleaning supplies, and that these matters are provided in a timely manner and fashion for the various areas to ensure that we have a sanitized, at all times, properly sanitized environment. With most staff working remotely, expenditure on items including air conditioning service, grounds maintenance, travel, printing, and duplication service, office supplies, and stationery and other contractual services naturally decreased compared to the previous fiscal year. I want to say a special thank you to our communications department, who has done a tremendous job under the leadership of Mr. Byron Thompson. He is the one who is responsible, sir, for the production today of these posters. I had indicated earlier that donations of some $500,000 had been received from corporate Bahamas individuals and others to help with our students in the purchase of donations for devices. Very proud of Mr. The young man, Mr. Longley, and his team at Leno for their help. I can tell you that Mr. Thompson, Byron, has taken that communications department to an absolutely another level. Just tremendous. He has made the feature of communications and sharing what is going on in the ministry with the wider public to be a preeminent objective of his. You all will know, and you see it all over TV right now. Ed Talk, seeing that? Ed Up, Ed Masterclass 101, Ed Tidbits, and Ed Table Talk, Unplugged, and other number of communication pieces coming out of the communication department. Additionally, all of our social media platforms are now very much up to date with very timely information in a way that now keeps the public easily informed. And we encourage the public to use those facilities for their information. They're perpetually available. These programs, of course, inform the public of the Ministry of Education's directives, initiatives, its progress, success, while showcasing the work and impact of school staff and reinforcing curriculum content for all students. Meanwhile, communications in the ministry recently received a boost with the launch of the free text notification update blasts. This initiative allows education stakeholders throughout the country to receive frequent updates from the Ministry of Education. Expenditure on these messaging projects approximately $34,000. Also, there's some more equipment, inclusive of hardware and software, to the tune of $75,000 that the ministry is now in the process of expending. And of course, you know, the community is always seeking that communication department to expand its human resources and welcome 2 new skilled members of its production staff. Many persons have asked, Mr. Speaker, about the infrastructure and about school repairs. You know, the onset of coronavirus has radically affected the demand placed upon our physical plant. Companies have been contracted to deep clean schools and offices, including our headquarters at University Boulevard. Plexiglass sneeze barriers, along with additional signage, had to be installed throughout our schools, satellite offices. Improvements coupled with our annual school repairs had to be carried out in the midst of emergency orders, lockdown, and the observation of safety protocols, as stipulated by the Ministry of Health. Mr. Speaker, due to COVID-19, the huge annual inspection of schools by the Ministry of Works for the development of scopes of works were delayed, which resulted in a domino effect in terms of scopes being prepared, contractors being selected, and contractors being mobilized. The lockdowns were especially restrictive as contractors were only able to work on a limited number of hours during the week. A shortage of funds for mobilization further delayed projects, some of which are now only being started. The majority of Family Island school repairs were carried out as usual, with the exception of those islands which may have been seeing a spike in their COVID numbers. I'm pleased to report that post-Dorian repairs at all schools in Grand Bahama are now complete. In Abaco, most Dorian school repairs are either complete or are nearing completion. This includes Patrick Bethel High and the Central Abaco Primary School. The Hopetown and Amy Roberts schools, which were devastated by Hurricane Dorian, will be completed in time for the opening of the 21-22 school year. The pandemic's effect on the economy cannot be understated here. The global slowdown resulting in tourism, our main economic driver, virtually came to a trickle. This, too, has resulted in a trickle-down effect on the disbursement of funds from the Ministry of Finance. In order to offset this, repair projects were prioritized so that schools would be able to open and function as much as possible this school year. And that included projects essential to camp operations, such as roof works, electrical and plumbing works, as well as air conditioning works. Our budget this year totaled $25+ million. I'm pleased to report that despite awaiting second payments totaling $9.7 million from the ministry, school repairs and works progressed to the point where schools are once again able to open safely and welcome the majority of our students throughout the country. Just as a wrap-up, sir, in terms of our expenditure, I just want to share with the Bahamian people, you, sir, and this Honourable Chamber, comparison of expenditure for the fiscal year 2019-20 versus 2020-21. Expenditure for the Ministry of Education mid-year increased by $195,000 from $55,211,679 in 2019 to $55,407,358 in 2021. Expenditure in the Department of Education mid-year decreased by $13,236,834 from $99,038,201 in 2019-20 to $85,801,367 in 2020. Expenditure Department of Archives mid-year also decreased by $22,233 from $309,843 2019-2020 to $287,610 2021. The revenue intake for the Ministry of Education mid-year also decreased by $191,877.32 from $258,211.96 to $66,334.64. Same thing with revenue in the Department of Archives, decreasing by $4,986.44 from $7,404.89 to $2,418.45. Mr. Speaker, on February 23rd, thousands of public school students on Eleuthera, Abaco, Zuma, and New Providence returned face-to-face. Before that, schools on the remaining family islands, including Grand Bahama, had already been in an in-person mode. From the beginning of this pandemic, government and the Ministry of Education made it clear that the in-person instructions of our students and the operation of our schools will be instructed and guided by public health and Ministry of Health officials. I stand here today to share our deepest appreciation and respect for the extraordinary guidance, direction, and help and support that the Ministry of Health, public health officials offered to our ministry, and especially the constant help and intervention of Dr. Philip Swan and his team to our ministry. In furtherance of the government of the Bahamas' emphasis on safety as a preeminent condition for the resumption of in-person classes, the Department of Education has published a strategic plan for the safe reopening of schools with the motto, safety first, education always. In pursuit of this objective, and in recognition of the role played by the Ministry of Health in determining acceptable standards for the resumption of classes, Ministry has been extremely dedicated in working, the Ministry of Health, that is, has been extremely dedicated in working with the Ministry of Education to ensure that the necessary guidelines and mandates are clear and are in place in schools for the resumption of in-person classes. We wish to express our great appreciation to the Chief Medical Officer, staff of the Ministry of Health, for their unswerving dedication to our efforts. Again, we acknowledge particularly the contribution of Dr. Philip Swan in the preparation of a joint Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education document which outlines the specificity, the standards to be complied with, which empowers individual schools to develop the plans which are necessary for campus-specific compliance. At this time, the Ministry of Health is permitting only 50% of the school's total enrollment to be in attendance on each campus per day on the affected island, as we continue to emphasize safety first. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, it is essential for parents and guardians to cooperate with the Ministry of Education in ensuring that when their children leave the school campus each day, that they continue to practice the legally mandated protocols so that children do not return to schools and potentially infect their fellow students and others on campus. We do not wish our schools to become, quote, super spreader site, end quote. The joint Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health document has been widely distributed and is available on the Ministry of Education's Facebook page and website, and will be this week published in the newspaper. Mr. Speaker, this ministry and this department, I stated initially, have seen its share of challenges, difficulties, problems. And as a consequence, we've had to be innovative, strategic, and creative. I once again extend to the entire ministry team and the department team, under their respective leadership, for the extraordinary work, dedication, commitment, and response to the demand for ongoing education that they have provided. In a moment such as this, I'm reminded of the words of the great prophet Isaiah, chapter 43, verse 1. When Israel was at its lowest, in the throes of the exile, the Lord through Isaiah spoke. And he said, O Israel, fear not, for I have redeemed thee. I have called you by name. Thou art mine. When thou passest through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overflow you. When you walk through the fire, shall not be burned, neither shall the flame kindle upon you. For I am the Lord thy God, the Holy One of Israel, thy Savior. South Beach Ministry of Education supports this mid-year program.